Dave Danford, welcome to Cutting Through the Noise.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to have you. I think you bring just a wealth of knowledge to the podcast that we've had a lot of specialists come in that do one thing incredibly well, and that's they're practitioners. I feel like we have our logo is the umbrella here at Pintler Group. When we think about a marketing umbrella, there's a lot of things that you've had your hands in throughout your career. And so I want to dive into that a little bit.
All right.
But first, maybe for our listeners, can you give a quick introduction of Dave Danford, the man, the myth, the legend?
Of course. I kind of have a generalist background. I started out as a CPA of all things from Arthur Andersen and did that in the Silicon Valley for several years. Then became CFO of a high growth startup. Then went back to business school and went into marketing, and that is where my marketing started. Mm-hmm. I think I learned one thing in business school.
Hopefully it was important.
It was one important thing.
Okay, good.
Pick a market leader that's high growth, and everything else will turn out just fine. So I picked Microsoft, and through my experience there, spent a good deal of time in the beginning more in a strategy role. I was kind of an experiment and learned about doing big merger and acquisition and other more strategic deals. Then from that went into heading up a new business unit to create a software licensing business. And that brought together the beginning of the internet and how to do things with software with changing the business model of kind of a stable business. And that grew quite rapidly to many billions of dollars and a global thing. And that gave me the chance to then go on and do a few more of those, start up a new business, understand the business model, understand the problem you're solving for a customer, get that product market fit, and then slowly begin to grow it until you get it right, and then push on the gas.
That's fascinating. I want to talk about all of those components.
Yeah, I never, when I started in my business career, I actually read a book called Intrapreneurship, but I ended up being able to do that career, and that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool. You mentioned in business school is where you kind of discovered marketing, or shortly after business school is where the marketing hat found your head, is that?
So the reason I went to business school was the Dave market fit of being a CPA was not perfect.
Not aligned with your vision of this is what I want to do for the rest of my days.
And I was definitely always fascinated by interacting with customers and understanding or attempting to understand what they were saying and what they wanted. Mm-hmm. And my sense was marketing was a good place to take that interest.
Yeah. So you started with a little company that not many of us have heard of. Microsoft is how you pronounce it?
It was kind of a risky deal at the time. They had this new thing called Windows.
Windows, okay.
I remember my early days, people were pretty skeptical that Windows was a thing. Like DOS was where it was at.
Interesting. And so Windows, the team, and do you remember how many people were there when you started? Not many?
Well, there were more than 1,000 for sure.
Okay. And you mentioned strategy. That's something that we haven't talked a lot about on the podcast, but one of your early roles, it sounded like, was formulating strategy for new Microsoft products. Is this right?
Yeah.
And so when you take on a new product, it gets put on the table, and the conference room is sitting there looking at, I guess in those days they may have looked at this physical product, but also they're testing it on a computer, right? But it comes in a CD. perhaps, what sort of questions are you asking at that moment in time? Like, here's something that isn't brought to market yet. We're not sure what the customer reaction will be. Like, what next?
So there are three basic elements that over the time I did it really played well. One was find as many people, customers, let's say 15 minimum, that have a similar problem, and attempt to pattern match what is the problem that they're encountering, and what are the feasible ways of solving that problem. Very independent of that, given that problem, where is value created, and understand over the life cycle of that problem where the inflection points of value are created, so that when you're listening to customers or people that have a problem, you can try to understand exactly where the most important parts of solving the problem would be. And then the third element is try to find and understand who else is in that ecosystem of solving the problem,
Mm-hmm.
and understand what they're doing, who they are, and how they're going about it. The other part of it, and this is probably a luxury of a big company like Microsoft, was don't be in too big of a hurry to try to scale. Try to wallow in the problem, the space, and where value is created,
Mm-hmm.
and iterate through it several times so that you get a good sense of confidence that you've actually got something that's going to solve a problem for a particular segment of the market.
Yeah, that does sound like, in many ways, a luxury, because then the next step is, okay, it's ready for prime time. And you can turn that dial up. A lot of businesses don't have that dial where they can say, okay, well, now we're going to deploy the marketing resources. We're going to get, we're going to get Bill Gates out there on all the talk shows. I don't know if he actually did a lot of talk shows, but there's a media powerhouse behind it. In some ways, or am I?
But I'm going to attempt. This is not a perfect attempt, but even at a big company like that, there was a period of time where you would bump along at kind of silently at a cash flow positive level, and just iterate and make, like, you don't just throw it together and scale. You get 15, then 20, then 30 customers.
It's not the hockey stick.
You don't want to start the hockey stick too early, because unwinding that is a really difficult thing. Certainly in the early days of the internet, letting something go live and getting hundreds of thousands or millions of people to start interacting with it,
Mm-hmm.
Creates a problem that's in and of itself a whole different animal.
Yeah, so the move fast and break things mentality was
it's
came upon
accurate,
later.
just not at scale.
right.
Because in those early days, move fast, break it, fix it, break it, fix it. You can iterate if you have 10, 15 customers.
Mm-hmm.
You keep them happy.
Right. High touch points, talk to them all the time, what's working, what isn't. Yeah.
And the other benefit of a small number of customers is that you get over the politeness factor, because if they're actually trying to use what you've created to solve a problem and it doesn't solve the problem, they will tell you.
And maybe they'll scream into the internet also and say, this doesn't work, this is broken, don't buy it. Yeah. That's really fascinating. And so your position there evolved as the company evolved, obviously. Can you talk about a project that you were a part of, from its infancy, that everything just went smooth sailing, that this was a project that at the end of your career at Microsoft you said, this is one of the things that I was most proud of, having spent my time there?
I will, but those are not directly correlated. In other words, my first reaction to tell me about a project that I did that went smoothly from the beginning, the real answer to that is there was never a project that I ever did that went
It
smoothly.
didn't exist. Okay. as smooth as a project could have gone, perhaps.
So certainly the one that I'm probably most proud of was something that was an idea that I had that, in this case, the decision maker was Steve Ballmer, the CEO at the time, but it was, that's a good idea, write a white paper on it, and we'll expose it to a few customers to see if there's a there there. And this project was called Home Advisor, not the Home Advisor that's on TV these days. But it was when this new thing was happening called the internet, and people were starting to consider looking for a home and financing their home online. And so the company that I was a part of before Microsoft did mortgage-backed securities, derivatives, and other sophisticated financial instruments, so I understood those markets. And so I wrote this white paper. It explained how it all could be done in real time on the internet. And long story short, very quickly, B of A, Wells Fargo, Freddie Mac, Lehman Brothers, and RFC, Residential Funding Corp, all wanted in.
Whoa.
And we literally within a period of a few months closed several $100 million of joint venture financing.
Wow.
And over a 5-year period made it so.
That's amazing.
Certainly probably one of the most nerve-wracking things that I ever went through was bringing that platform up where those players were going to use it in their branch network and their websites for the first time, because if it didn't work, that would be a very public challenge.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that was pretty fascinating and brought together kind of one of the original ideas of what the internet could do, a problem it could solve, a very disparate platform where all these different players could use it, and it could bring, the tagline we used was bringing the point of sale to Wall Street in real time. And so it allowed mortgages to be created and put right into mortgage-backed security.
Wow.
in real time. So it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, that's quite the project.
And it was one of those where the creation of value, the barrier to entry in creating that value was quite high, because only a player that had hundreds of millions of dollars behind it could really get the position in the market and the trusted players involved, and then be able to deliver some pretty hardcore technology that could be trusted, that could price billions of dollars of transactions in a reliable way. So that was pretty crazy, pretty fun.
Pretty crazy, pretty fun.
Wild.
So in a lot of ways, it's, the story of David versus Goliath. Microsoft was in some ways the Goliath here. They could stamp through the forest and say, we have the backing, hundreds of millions of dollars. We can get this thing to go. We on this podcast are interested in the David story also. So I'm curious, when you're at Microsoft, how do you think about strategy from David's standpoint, where you're doing things that may not necessarily scale, like you talked about, avoiding that hockey stick, but well, maybe let me ask the question this way. So Apple comes along, and were you there at Microsoft when, this little scrappy competitor from California is also kind of nipping at the heels of Microsoft, and what was that experience like, thinking we're the Goliath here and here's David throwing rocks at us? Or did it not go that way?
Well, my experience with Apple was from the perspective of being moved onto the Windows Phone team.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was in a related part of the business, understanding how corporations and business people could use their phone as a work asset, because at the time Microsoft was quite strong in that space.
Yeah.
But unexpectedly to me anyhow, I was asked to move from my job to an entirely new team that was designed to react to the fact that the iPhone had been released.
Mm.
And so I experienced, that was by far and away the most profound thing that I saw in my time in tech, because Apple had used, I'll call it experience design, to create a very effective solution to a problem that billions of people have, and that is being connected to each other, being connected to the media and music and communication mechanism, and being able to put that along with their wallet into one device
Mm-hmm.
that they could put in their pocket, and was elegant at allowing them to do everything they wanted. And so to see that and to try to understand how they pulled that off, and to understand, and we ultimately realized that we had to go back and start over.
Mm-hmm.
And figure out what it was that we were going to try to do, and entirely recreate our phone project.
Wow.
And so to react to, at that time, little Apple, what became the Goliath.
Yeah.
And we were, very humbled to try and figure out, given what they'd done,
Mm-hmm.
how would we react? And when they first came out with the iPhone, it wasn't that big of a product. It took
Right.
years.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a period of time there where it seemed like we could react, correct, and get something out that was capable of competing.
Did you ever catch anybody on your team with an iPhone and say,
Gladly.
what do you got there?
No, my point of view, because that was definitely, that was something that was hotly debated all the way up the management ladder.
Yeah.
And I definitely was an advocate for having people have iPhones and understanding everything about it.
And what was your reasoning there?
If you don't understand if you're going to create a differentiated product that solves a problem in a unique way, and you don't know what everyone else is doing,
Right.
how could you, I do believe that in building products, you have to be very humble in understanding what someone really needs and how you solve a problem in a unique way,
Mm-hmm.
and why whatever it is you're doing is better than everyone else, and that you're creating value for that other person that you're proud of.
Right.
So if you don't understand everything about other opportunities, other competitors, how they compete in the market,
Yeah.
you're not doing a service to your customer.
I feel like people should rewind that and listen to it again. Do you find that with entrepreneurs that's something that is a big internal struggle for them? Examining, who do I think my customer is? I'm making this product for customer X, and then somebody like yourself might come in and say, you know, how sure are we that this is your customer?
To me, that is the biggest hurdle that I see in any startup, because having the humility to explore, especially with SaaS-based products, but understand the neighborhoods of other offerings, how people are creating value in your space, and where you fit in. If you aren't a student of that, and if you aren't very humble in understanding how you do something different or better or at a better price point, then you're really just not serving your customer.
Yeah.
The first thing I mean, I'm sure most people do this, but the first thing I do when I hear or see something about a new product is do a Google search
Yeah.
and understand the keyword neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
Because in today's world, it's a global world, and you can find out pretty quickly who's doing what.
Yeah.